reception is the methodology that I developed over 6 years ago now, and I have data from the last 6 NFL seasons, 2019. And essentially, what I'm trying to do is isolate wide receiver play from all the other factors, because, I mean, everybody that follows the sport closely knows wide receivers have to have so many other things go right outside of their own control in order to improve production, put up fantasy points and get targets and everything that we want. But really, I think the only thing that the wide receiver can control is how often do they go out there and run good routes, get separation, get open. And I think that can, and I think reception perception has shown that over the years, we've seen that guys who finish over the 80th percentile are extremely likely to finish with a 1,000-yard season at some point in their career. I believe that I have over 250 players logged. Of those 250 players, there's been 31 that have finished, 31 individual guys, so they could have done it over multiple seasons, have finished over that 80th percentile. Only 9 of them have not scored a 1,000-yard season yet. And if you hack off the incoming rookies, like the 2019 guys, again, the guys we saw last year, then you're just looking at Curtis Samuel, Sterling Shepard, Calvin Ridley, and Anthony Miller are the only guys that have done it yet to kind of break out yet. I think you can chalk up other factors to why they haven't broken out yet. So essentially, I think it's a powerful predictive metric and powerful predictive process to when are these guys going to break out? Are they going to establish themselves as productive players? And I think that's the benefit of having done it for 6 years now. I know the data is telling me now much more than I did, 3 years ago or something when we did this pod together, Adam. So it's been a fun process, and I think I'm more bullish on it than ever, is what I should say, after doing it for 6 years, seeing what it does tell us and what it doesn't tell us, and how it does effectively isolate wide receiver play from everything else that goes on around.
That's great, and I do think that the more data you have, obviously, the better. And I think one of the things you can maybe speak to now is this thing is year to year. Like, can some guy be really good in reception perception 1 year, and the next year he's suck, and vice versa? Or how sticky is the data that you found on wide receivers?
Yeah, it's extremely sticky. Like, you see guys when they finish, really you're only going to expect guys to alternate year over year if all things are equal, like, they haven't been injured or something like that. Really, these guys are only going to shift maybe 2 percentage points, 3 percentage points year over year, which is a drastic change. So really, that I think is another thing that is powerful about this, is the fact that once you see them establish themselves at this point in their career, they're probably not going to change very much. They're going to stay the same year over year. And then when something happens, I think of a guy like Des Bryant several years ago, that 2017 season, I want to say it was, his reception perception stats just fell off a cliff. And to me, at that point, it's like, well, he's done. Like, he's toast. It's over for Des. And he hasn't played in the NFL since. And that's just one example. So typically, once guys establish themselves for a few years, this is what their reception perception metrics are. They really don't change very much.
It sounds like you do. Do you think that separation correlates really well to fantasy points? Like, are the guys getting open the ones that are getting fantasy points, period? I mean, it makes perfect sense. I'm just curious if there's like a straight line there.
It's not a totally straight line. I mean, it does depend, because you'll see guys who line up in the slot, like a Cooper Kupp or a Juju Smith-Schuster. Those guys have some of the worst success rates against press or man, but they have very high success rates against zone, because that's the type of coverage that they're seeing most often playing inside. So that's just good coaching, taking a guy like a Cooper Kupp or a Juju who might not be able to function outside, and then putting them in a role that maximizes their ability. And then those guys also become they're like weapons inside, more than just these, bunny hop, pop gun slot receivers like a Jamison Crowder or something like that. So I think that's another thing too, is it does kind of depend, again, talking to things I would have said 3 or 4 years ago, I might have looked at a guy that has a very low success rate first man coverage and say, oh, he's not good, he's not going to be productive. But I think over the years, we've seen that those guys can be productive. It's just about finding the right spot.
Yeah, okay, that makes a ton of sense. Let's get to some players here. The people want your player takes. The people are dying here. I want to start with Amari Cooper. We are above market by a pretty significant amount on Amari Cooper, and I want to get high on the Dallas offense. Obviously, I think Amari Cooper is a very good player. You can either confirm or deny that. My concern is, how does a player who I think is this good not show up so often? I mean, Amari Cooper, 4 games under 7 draft points last year, 5 of his games last year were under 10 DraftKings points. Like, it's pretty hard on DraftKings with full PPR, bonuses, whatever, to score that low. First of all, what is your reception
He's actually never scored higher than the 71st percentile in success rate versus man coverage, and he's been below the 22nd percentile in reception perception success rate versus press coverage in 2 of his last 3 years. I think Dallas does a really good job. Like, credit to the Jason Garrett coaching staff, which we don't get to say very often, but they've done a pretty good job since he's arrived in Dallas, moving him around the field. Even if they don't exclusively line him up in the slot, they'll put him there sometimes. They also deploy him at the flanker position and then move him around pre-snap. That has been really big for Amari, having these big games, which was just a nightmare in Oakland. That, like, Jack Del Rio coaching staff just threw him out there X receiver, which is an awful fit for a guy who is an inconsistent separator versus man and press coverage. I definitely think that the inconsistency in his stat lines are borne out by the inconsistency in his actual game. That's not to say that he's not a good player and he's not going to be really productive this year, but I do find that to be a reason for me personally to be like below the market on Amari Cooper, or at least within where he's going in drafts, and typically find myself taking some of the other players later, especially Michael Gallup, where he's going on extremely well.
Right. I was going to ask you that. It seems like you're Michael Gallup in like the 7th to Amari Cooper in this round.
Yeah, I mean, no question. And I think that you look at the opportunity between these two guys, it wasn't very far apart last year. And actually, Gallup had a higher percentage of team targets and air yards when he played last year. And I mean, if you really want to have like a hot take, I think he plays the harder assignment in the Cowboys offense because he plays that X receiver spot. He doesn't move around pre-snap. He's going up against a lot of press man coverage on the outside. Good corners are going to follow Amari around the field when he plays on the outside, but Gallup is going to get tougher just defensive assignments with how much he is pressed. But I thought he had a really good season last year. Very solid separator, over 70% success rate versus man coverage, and awesome in the contested catch game. And I think we know who Amari Cooper is at this point in his career. I think there might still be more of a ceiling that is an unknown for Michael Gallup. So I do find myself gravitating more towards him at cost than I do where Cooper would go.
Yeah, this whole, obviously my friend, Caesar Peter Jennings, he has this whole Amari Cooper bit going, and people think it's just a bit. I mean, Peter needs to hear what you just said about Amari Cooper. I mean, he's legit down multiple 6 figures on Amari Cooper lifetime. Not as much as he's down lifetime on O.J. Howard, but definitely. So I'm going to play this for him, and maybe we'll save him some money this year. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, he's a good player, but I think at this point it's been multiple teams, multiple coaching staffs, and he's always had these inconsistent lines. And I think it's hard to say it's anything other than just the reality of who he is as a player.
Yeah. Okay. This next one I want to get to is interesting to me. Kenny Galladay. I think that there's a chance, and I don't want to say bad things about Kenny Galladay because he's so fun to watch. I think there's a chance that people might be his projected target share. I mean, last year he was kind of in line with Marvin Jones when Stafford was healthy and Danny on the ball was not that much further behind. And also, I've seen some people in this space say Kenny Galladay's not a separator at all. So I'm really curious what your take is on Kenny Galladay from at least a route running talent perspective first.
Yeah, from like a route running and talent perspective, I was actually really impressed with his year 3 jump. I mentioned guys typically stay sort of the same. Some players that we do see take those big jumps are when they incoming rookies second year, and then sometimes into that 3rd year there's still another jump there. And Galladay is one of those players who's actually jumped a 10 full percentage point from his rookie year to his 3rd year in success rate versus man coverage. I think he's actually like a true number 1 receiver at this point. Both his success rate versus man and press coverage cleared the 81st percentile last year. So I think he is a legit talent, but I do have some of the same worries from a fantasy standpoint. I have him wide receiver 11 in my 3rd tier. Find guys that are typically going later than him in drafts. So I haven't really found myself gravitating towards fantasy because of some of the reasons that you just mentioned, but I was really, really impressed with how he's come along from kind of a raw year 1 player to 2nd year Jones around like wide receiver 40 or something in a tier with players that I really like to draft. You'll look like Mike Williams, Anthony Miller, some of these other guys there. So I would definitely prefer to take Jones later on as well.
Okay. All right. Let's get to DJ Chark. I think a lot of people maybe don't know a lot about DJ Chark just because he kind of had an unheralded college career. 2018 second round pick, comes out last year, established himself as Jacksonville's number one wide receiver. Had some really impressive games. Certainly looks good from a size speed perspective. What you see on DJ Chark last year.
Yeah, I feel like I haven't talked about DJ Chark very often because people don't seem to really like ask about him very often. And I think it's funny because every year we have sort of like a favorite Jaguars sleeper receiver in the fantasy world. But it seemed like DJ Chark was like nobody's guy last year. But he, emerged to have, I think it was like 174 yards as a rookie. That goes over 1,000 last year. It's such a tremendous jump. And I think it's very much like backed up by how good of a deep threat and how good he is in contested situations as well. I don't think he profiles as, a true number one receiver. He's got like about a 58th percentile success rate first man coverage, which isn't bad, but it's right around sort of the league average area. But at the same time, I think there's still room for growth there. So I do think Chark is like a fine, mid-round sort of pick, but I gravitated towards other guys. Not like anything to do with various players or just questions about the offenses. It was definitely a huge jump that he deserves a lot of credit.
Don't do it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think
Magic rack. Steered the 6-ball, hit the magic rack, and went right in front of the 5. That's just bad luck. Could have went out of the way. And 5 still goes, at least in one pocket.
Alright, I would be remiss if I
Might
didn't ask
go
about
in this one too, but it's.
forget about the injuries for a second. I don't want to hear about the injuries.
I don't think
Is
Goodyear
Will
should.
Fuller good enough to soak up more target share than he was getting? In other words, we know DeAndre Hopkins is vacated. There are certain guys who can only play kind of this lifter, deep threat role. Can Will Fuller play more of a foundational role in this offense? Do you think he's good enough to do so?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, he's one of these guys, like first glance in perception, he's not going to show up super well because he runs those vertical routes, which inherently cross the league average. The farther you go down the field, the lower the success rates are. So the success rate versus man press, like from a raw standpoint, is not that great. But if you really start to parse things
That makes
out,
it even
he
worse.
has one of the
And
best
5 still goes, but
best scoring in the corner route, of course, there's deep vertical
the 6
pattern. But look a little bit further, he actually has
6
some of the
doesn't
best
go.
scores on the curl
I'll have to
route,
break
the
it
flat
out if
route,
I'm
some of those
shot
routes
on
that
it.
you just need to run to put up basic production. I think the one thing that I definitely think the targets are coming for Fuller, but the one thing that does kind of give me one pause on Fuller this year, and I'm in. I'm at wide receiver 30. I think you really should be targeting him aggressively. DeAndre Hopkins was one of in perception over the last few years, one of the most highly covered double coverage players. A guy that really demanded that extra defensive attention, which took just made Will Fuller just run wild on the other side because it's such a bind for a defense to be in. Do you dictate extra attention to this elite number one receiver over here, or do you double cover the vertical threat that can kill you for like 200 yards, 2 touchdowns at any time? That problem is now erased. So I think for Houston, what we really want to see for Fuller, which is kind of a bummer, is you want to see some of these other guys stay healthy as well. Brandon Cooks, Kenny Stills, Randall Cobb is not as important in my opinion, but yeah, I'm in on Fuller, and I think that to answer the question, he is definitely good enough to be more of a target hog in the offense than he's been so far. Even if, like I said, you look at perception just on the initial spreadsheets, it's like, he's not that good, but you kind of need to parse that out because of the role he plays in. And it's also worth noting too, just like Hopkins was one of the best like contested receiver 50-50 balls in the NFL as well. In reception, he has an over 84% conversion rate for
Yeah, I'm
situations.
gonna shoot it.
Yeah, and obviously, like, deep targets are also extremely valuable. So, like, if you can just add a couple or a few of those DeAndre Hopkins type intermediate routes, like, I don't know, we have a wide receiver 29, I believe, right now, and I know that's his ADP has been going up. I believe ADP is around wide receiver 34 right now, but we're going to continue to stay ahead on Will Fuller. All right.
Yeah, I have been 30, so we're right around the same.
Okay. There's been controversy among the ETR ranks, Marquise Brown, and I'm scared of my team.
Sure, yeah.
Now he says he's 180 pounds, and everybody's in the best shape of their life, blah, 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 but he says he's up to 180, which would be pretty big for a guy. Anyway, I'm going on too long. We need your take on Marquise Brown.
Yeah, when I talked just on the weight thing, when I talked to Marquise Brown before the 2019 draft, he said that his playing weight, target-wise, is like 175 pounds. And at that point, I don't think he's bigger than that. At this point, that's good. It's just worth noting he probably lost all that weight last year because he didn't get to work out at all in the lead up to the draft. So when he weighs at the combine in such a small number, that was one thing that he hammered home the draft, like I mentioned. I have Marquise Brown, wide receiver 29, atop my tier 5, right there with Will Fuller. So I think those guys are very similar outlooks this year. But I love Marquise Brown from a player perspective. I do think he's going to be that outlier. I mean, because he's not just that great vertical threat. He is, to me, a full field route runner. 83rd percentile success rate versus man coverage. Only fell below the average success rate on one route, which was the comeback route last year. And again, this is all while he wasn't fully healthy. I think there's still some development in his game for sure. But I can't stop myself from drafting the guy that I think has a superstar outlook while he's playing in a great offense attached to the MVP at quarterback and not a lot of target competition, like you mentioned. So Brown is one of the guys that I don't want to leave a fantasy draft without this year, and I'm very confident that he can become that Tyreek Hill type of player as he continues to develop.
I just want to let you know that the graveyard is just littered with people who thought they could. We thought they could identify the outliers. It's absolutely littered. I mean, I was told Tavon Austin was the next Deshaun Jackson on this. You know what I mean? And I'm
right, but I mean, Tavon Austin can't play. Like he can't run. He can't actually run routes like a guy like Marquise Brown does. Which I think that was the reason that Tyreek Hill, to put a little perception pat on the back here. That was in Tyreek Hill's rookie year when you went back and people were saying he's like a Cordero Patterson, Tavon Austin gadget guy. But when you did look at his perception, he was up there above that 80th percentile against man coverage, against press coverage. I think he's going to be Tyreek Hill's a better player than I think Marquise Brown is going to be because he's better against press, he's better in contested situations. But I think this is why I do reception is to try to find these outliers. So I agree with you. There are plenty of speed guys that have not been good, consistent separators. J.J. Nelson was one that we just signed. Details that go into it, and I think
Come on, ball. Spread nicely
always
here.
been one of those technicians that I think that's only going to continue to show itself more this year.
All right. Shall see.
He's
Marquise
decent.
Brown. I will say I do like the way that they used him. If you go back and you watch how they actually use Marquise Brown, it's really encouraging. They're not telling him to just run up the sideline. You know what I mean? You're using
4 to 5, 5 to 6.
To me, for sure.
Tricky.
Okay. Deontay Johnson, I think this is a really good case for why you want to do perception. The QB context last year for the Steelers was absolutely woeful. Can you separate out how good Deontay Johnson is from the quarterback play he suffered through last year? And that's kind of the whole point of what Matt is doing. Deontay Johnson is no longer sleeping. Early in the draft process, you get him in 12th, 13th round. I've seen him go 7th or 8th right now. People are definitely hip to the game on Deontay Johnson. And you were obviously able to evaluate him outside of QB context last year. What did you see?
Yeah, Johnson was my biggest riser in reception after putting him through the process. I knew who he was. I knew he had a pretty good season last year, obviously, but I wasn't sure what to expect. Put him through reception. I mean, this guy is one of the best young route runners in the NFL. 88th percentile.
Don't scratch.
Success rate versus coverage. Separates short, deep, intermediate.
Still a little flat on that ball. You really had to punch it out. Some risk there, but it's bad scratch in that spot though. He's on a nice run
this
there.
team needs that outside receiver to separate at all levels to dictate coverages. And I actually think James Washington is a really good player too, worth noting. I find myself actually drafting James Washington a lot in the double-digit rounds when people just completely forgot about him among all this Deontay Johnson hype. I think those two guys out there, as a vertical threat, as an elite separator, that's going to put defenses in a bind. It's going to make play easier on the inside. I think it's going to create a lot of favorable matchups there. But yeah, Johnson to me I think he's going to break out this year. I have projected for over 1,000 yards, and I'm really
shorter,
done
would have
last
been
year.
a lot
Stayed
better.
healthy. And that's a worthwhile question, obviously asking for this year too. But I mean, last year he was legit unbelievable as a route runner. Cleared the 87th percentile success rate versus man.
I can
Actually,
stop it in
posted
time. That's
94th
too short.
percentile success rate versus press, which I think people would not assume from him because he's a guy that does typically play inside. But last year he actually played the fewest snaps from the slot that I've ever logged in reception so far. Like I think he Tate's their slot receiver for sure, and I think Shepard is more of that slot flanker hybrid. Like he can win on the outside when you're looking at just those two guys. I think from an across the route tree perspective, he's easily the best Giants receiver. I don't hate Darius Slayton, but I think he profiles more as like a Marvin Jones type of guy where he's going to be hit or miss because he's out there playing that nice receiver role, but it's not like a great separator versus press for man. He's going to be reliant on a lot of big plays. He's going to be reliant on winning in tight spaces, which I don't really like. Last year he had fire in those situations, but that might not just cleanly roll over for 1 year and the other. So yeah, my bet in this Giants receiver core all off season, and it continues to be, is taking Sterling Shepard, in the 7th, 8th round, depending on your league format, because I'm very confident that he's the best Giants receiver from a talent perspective, and he was getting the usage last year that showed that over 20% of the team targets, and even if they're going to be more of those layup looks, I'd much rather take a layup receiver than a vertical outside receiver with a quarterback like Daniel Jones, who I'm still not sure exactly how good Daniel Jones is.
Yeah, totally agree. Can you believe that? I mean, it's just shocking to me that the ADPs are where they are. I mean, Darius Slayton is legit. Like, his ADP is significantly higher than both Shepard's and Tate's, and I would have Darius Slayton last in those three, but they're crazy, man.
Yeah, but I think it's highlight bias to me because, like I said, the big plays that Slayton makes, any goofball sitting at home, you'd be like, that was a really good play because it was down the field, it was in tight coverage,
Right,
it was in the end zone, whatever. But the things that Shepard does well, like route running over and over again, getting open, that is conducive to drawing volume consistently, especially again for a quarterback who I think needs to see things come open and get the ball.
All right, I think
another slop shot. I needed that. That's 2 slop shots in 2 games. It doesn't happen very often. Nonetheless, kept me from having an open frame. I'll take it. If anything, if you hit it short, you can make it 2 rails, and I know that that's there, but I'm, really never thinking about the 3 railer. It's a pretty lucky slop shot.
I know you haven't looked at him a ton, but any initial thoughts on Alazar?
Yeah, so when you had him on the outline, because, Adam, I love you. I love your very intelligent listeners. I did a little special, went in and started charting him this morning just for the show. So again, holding off here on full field, I've got a strong take on Alan Lazard. I will say this, that I think he's better than Geronimo Allison last year. He was a guy that got pushed up into single-digit rounds occasionally last year, but just one of the absolute worst separators in reception. I think that Lazard might be closer, just from the initial look, will probably finish closer to around the league average, which might be good enough to take in that 13th round range. There's not a great ceiling there. I would agree with Evan on that fact, just because I don't think he's some ascended breakout superstar. I think I'm projecting Adam to lead the NFL in targets this year. So yeah, for me, I think it's not a big time ceiling pick, but I definitely think the role is there. And I think most importantly, he's not Geronimo Allison. He's good enough to actually hold that role down.
Yeah. He does have the body type that is big, he's strong. He might not be
in spaces, which is why you saw him be a really big red zone threat in his rookie year, which was carrying over from being a big-time touchdown scorer as a collegiate player. I think that Miller is, if you're going to be out on Deontay Johnson or Terry McLaurin or Marquise Brown because the hype is going to get too high, I think Miller's the perfect guy to come back for in the later rounds if you want to buy one of these reception guys. Miller last year posted an 83rd percentile success rate versus man coverage. Actually was at 91st against press. Not a guy who's going to face a ton of press coverage because he's playing in the slot most often, but I think that shows that he can win at all levels, and it's just wide open there from a depth chart.
That's terrible. Trying to draw that one. A little yippy.
Robinson's going to be there as that true elite number one, but you're Ted Ginn, Riley Ridley, the ghost of Jimmy Graham. It's just wide open from a depth chart perspective. It wouldn't surprise me if he walks into like 80, 90 targets, and again, you're getting that way down the draft board. He's a guy I'm definitely really excited and expecting a breakout season this year, as long as like the shoulder issue with him isn't a chronic situation, which it might be, but I do think that he has the chops as a player to be that really good breakout guy.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons he's going so late is because people are worried about the quarterback situation, right? A, they don't know who's going to start, and B, they have no confidence in Trubisky, and they have very little confidence in Foles too. But that's part of what's baked into the ADP, right? Like, obviously we can't control that. We can control how well Anthony Miller plays, but from ADP perspective, it's a lot about the quarterback play. I actually do think though that if Foles gets in there, I think it will be an upgrade on Trubisky. But
yeah, I was going to ask you because you're a Philly guy. Where do you stand on the whole Foles
yeah, Foles' most egregious year, what people remember from him is when he was with Jeff Fisher, and like nobody plays well for Jeff Fisher. Like, I'm not going to hold it against the guy. So yeah, I'm optimistic that if Foles gets in there and runs kind of the same scheme that he ran here in Philly when they won the Super Bowl, yeah, I think he'll be an upgrade on Trubisky. Not he'll be a role leader, but it'll be better for Anthony Miller, I think, if Foles gets in there. That's for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, there's a few more here I want to hit on quickly. The Seattle situation, because I've been on the clock, and both DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett have been available, and I'm just kind of like paralyzed. And we see this in DFS a lot, like you don't know who to play, Cooks, Woods, or Cobb, and stuff like that. I don't think that's right. I want to have a stance on DK Metcalf versus Tyler Lockett. I like them both so much. Obviously, DK Metcalf from a physical specimen perspective, Tyler Lockett from a continuity and chemistry perspective with Russ Wilson. Do you have a take on these guys? I assume you like them both. Everybody likes them both. Do you have a take on DK versus Lockett?
Yeah, I do love them both. I actually think that both of these guys could do similar with what the Bucs guys did last year. Be a 1A, 1B, and like own 50% of the target share just to themselves because the rest of the wide receiver depth chart is a joke. The tight end position is a lot of questions. So I do like them both. I think that it doesn't have to be a one or the other type of situation, but I do have Tyler Lockett ranked extremely high. Wide receiver 12 for me. Right there in the second tier or third tier of guys. And yeah, well, excuse me, the third tier of guys there at wide receiver 12. I'm very bullish on Lockett as a player. Reception perception has always been very bullish on Tyler Lockett as a player. He was like my breakout guy in 2016. Had a lot of injuries, didn't really come together. Started to pop in 2018, but last year I think was the year where Tyler Lockett finally did become that superstar wide receiver. Just among the guys sampled in 2018, he was 5th in success rate versus man coverage, 3rd in success rate versus press coverage. Both of those were over the 95th percentile in reception perception history dating back to 2014. I think, like I said, Lockett is a legit stud. Sees high value targets as a vertical threat and in scoring position, playing with one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the NFL. It's like in the 4th round to me, it's a no-brainer. Like I'm taking Tyler Lockett and I'm running with it. But again, all that is not to say that I don't like DK Metcalf, who actually profiles very similarly to Dez Bryant in reception perception. Like Dez, that was a pre-draft comp for him too. DK last year only lined up on the one side of the field over 60% of his snaps. He had a very simplified role. Only 53% of DK's routes in reception perception were a slant or 9 out. But like, who cares? Because he goes out and just absolutely crushes that assignment, similar to Dez. Dez finished at the 95th percentile success rate versus press in 2014, and 50% of his routes that year were slant, 9, or post. So I see those guys as being really similar players long term. I really like Desmond. I really like DK Metcalf, but give me like Tyler Lockett every time if he's there in the fourth round because I think the ceiling and the floor are like so high.
Yeah. I love building teams with both of them, and Russ, if you can do it, that sounds like a ton of fun. A couple more guys quickly. I want to ask about how you two guys with injuries. Odell claims, or I don't know claims, I believe in the sports hernia injury that he played with all of last year. He got outplayed by Jarvis Landry for much of last year. I thought, what did you think of Odell's season last year, and how do you factor in these guys who, kind of are playing through? He was maybe limited, but he looked mostly fine to me, but I'm no expert.
Yeah, Odell's a really tough one because, like, when you look at his career in reception, I mean, he was one of, in the early days, all the way to 2018, one of the truly elite, legendary, talented players. Success rate in first man coverage in 2014 and 2018, so beginning and the final year of his Giants career, are the second and third best reported scores in series history. So that's dating from 2014 out to 2019. I mean, again, we're talking about a legitimate, legendary talent. Then last year in 2019, his 68% score was 126th out of over 250 receivers charted. So that's like going from the top to the right middle or something like that. It's not as if he suddenly became a bad player, but it was a huge fall. And I think it's really easy to sit here and say, well, he was hurt. Like, and I think that he was hurt. Like, when you just watch him play to me on film, charters, routes over and over again, he's just clearly not the same guy. But then it would be easy to say, okay, outlier year, he's going to get right back to that legendary talent form. But I don't know that you can write that in pen. It's really an impossible answer to know because there's a chance that he could be, like I said, these guys don't fluctuate very much in reception perception. If they're right and they're healthy, they usually stay within that range. But when you think of guys like Des Bryant, I mentioned this at the top, he suddenly fell off and it was just over for Des. I don't think it's going to be over for Odell, but I think even if you're like me and you're optimistic, I have him at wide receiver 8, wide receiver 9. I think he is going to bounce back to that top level form. But you would be a complete idiot to not at least account for the fact that this might be sort of the new reality for Odell. Not that he's going to be hurt every year, but that he's lost a step because of just a mounting number of lower body injuries. So, like I said, one of the best players ever in reception perception, coming to an average year, my first instinct is to say he's going to bounce back. And I think that's where I stand this year. I'm going to keep that candle lit for at least one more year. But you also have to account for that risk in his profile as well.
You could also say positives for Odell, coaching regime change. I thought coaching last year was really poor, and they're going to institute more play action, which I think will fit with Odell really well. And also you can say offensive line improvement and significant offensive line improvement, which I think will help Baker for sure. So yeah, I think there's a lot working in Odell's favor as like kind of a bounce back for sure. And yeah, hopefully he's healthy too, because I do like him as like a 3rd, 4th round bounce back kind of player. And sometimes you can get him there.
Yeah, I know you've always harped on his like the big slant routes that'll take to the house. Totally just stick that knife in there. There was just so few of those plays last year because like his slant route percentage in reception perception dropped from about 28% to down to 17%, which is
I really need to get it up here a little
if we talk
further.
about all this really bad history of wide receivers changing teams, elite wide receivers changing teams, maybe part of it is that like when you go to a new coaching staff that like they don't know how to use the player they got correctly, right? Like isn't that some of it? Like yeah, maybe Odell didn't play well, so
try to stop
the coaches
that.
just screwed him over.
I think that's definitely true. I mean, I think they looked at him as like a completing piece to what was really a good deep ball passing game in Baker's rookie year. I mean, he was 6th in yards accumulated on passes over 20 plus yards down the air as a rookie, despite not playing a full season. And I think they looked at Beckham's like big playability and said, let's just let him be that. But we still have Jarvis Landry, picking up these layup balls down here. But they just didn't give Odell very many layups last year. They didn't really move him around very often. And I think that's what Kevin Stefanski's offense does really well for wide receivers. So I agree that is just another layer on what could be a bounce back year for him.
For sure. All right. This was great. I learned so much, Matt. Tell the people where they can find you, where they can find you, all that.
Yeah, you find me on Twitter at @Mattson_BYB, the best place to find reception nuggets or access to or where you can get access to the information by purchasing fantasy football or all drafted. Just go on Twitter, use the hashtag reception perception search some players. I've thrown stuff out there about almost all of these guys that we've talked about today. If you got questions about it, hit me up on Twitter. I'm always down to talk reception.
Cool, man. Yeah, this was awesome. I really did learn a ton, and I love having specialists on who really are focused in on one thing, like Matt is. So be sure you're following him on Twitter. Check out all his work. We will be back later this week with some more position by position breakdowns and some more outlooks. Trying to get Master of Math Mike Leone on to join me and Evan as well. So stay tuned for that. So for Producer Week, for Matt, for Matt's Dolls, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody. To episode 92 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm one of the writers here at ATR. We're just 3 short weeks away from week 1. Very clear now that the NFL is going to happen. We need to get our big boy pants on. For that, of course, enjoy ADP's, the lord of your top 115 rankings. His fellow co-founder, Evan Silva. Evan, what's going on?
NFL teams are practicing. Those people that were calling us idiots for thinking there would be an NFL season for months and months have somehow evaporated into dust. And it's a great time of year. Unfortunately, we don't have any preseason games to bet on and play DFS with, but I'll tell you what we're being given right now, and it's a lot of information. We've had a lot of early injuries. We've had some significant rankings movement, and that's what we're going to focus on today.
Yeah, in an alternate universe right now, Ryan Griffin is just throwing touchdowns to Tanner Hudson, and it's just total pants off. Anyways, for anyone new here, I hope that you'll go back and listen to a lot of the pods we've already done this offseason over the last few months. We've covered a ton of ground. We're going to cover a ton more ground over the next few weeks with a lot of podcasts. Be sure you're subscribed. It's free. More importantly, as Evan said, football is happening, my friends. I know a lot of people have tuned out all offseason, maybe not done their normal preparation because they thought football wouldn't happen. But it is, and we've been working on our draft kit for the last 5 months, keeping it continuously updated. It's just $35. If for whatever reason the season does end up getting canceled, you'll get a free kit whenever the NFL resumes. I think there really is a big edge to be had. Like you can see it in some of these best ball drafts that we've been doing on Underdog and on DraftKings, FFPC. Like, you know, we have a ton of content and rankings up for these best ball stuff. You can see in the best ball stuff that it seems like people are less prepared than they normally are. We can certainly get an edge, so head to EstablishTheRun.com. Check out everything in our draft kit. Really appreciate everyone who has already purchased. All right. As I said, there's been a lot going on. Camps are, guys are hitting in pads. We're seeing first team reports from beat writers that's injuries, which we're going to get into. We have 10 or 11 topics here we're going to hit on today. I want to start with this Todd Gurley story. And it was like early, and I was reading, and I came across this report from Mclaurin of ESPN. And the quote was this: Mclaurin has covered the Falcons for a while, considered probably one of the best Falcons beat reporters. He says, during the early phases of the Falcons' acclimation period, Todd Gurley walked with a noticeable limp and wore a compression sock on his left leg. Yet, he showed speed and explosion in drills. He went on to say one source from his days with the Ravens told ESPN, Gurley can't be his field during still being a productive back. And so I tweeted that out, and I think it set off, you know, major alarms. And immediately I was in drafts where Todd Gurley wasn't going into like the 4th or 5th round, where previously his ADP was 29.5. I think that might be a little bit of an overreaction, but if you listen to the Bus episode, I was out on Todd Gurley even before this. I think Evan was
Tricky little 2-ball. Good break.
Does this quote scare you at all?
See if I can get on the 2.
I think it's somewhat expected, and I didn't have to make any rankings movements here. We're not that far off of Todd Gurley in terms of straight up positional rank, but we are way lower when you're looking at the top 150.
Can't play that.
You know, like maybe 20 spots lower or something like that. That is ADP. So, look, we know that there is a major downside to Todd Gurley when we're drafting inside those first 4 rounds or so. We are absolutely more concerned with the downside of the players that we're picking than when we get into the 6th, 7th round. That's why we like, Will Fuller, a guy like, we like taking chances on a guy like Will Fuller because he doesn't go until the 6th or 7th round, and we don't really have to worry about his floor there as much. But when we're investing top 3 and 4 round picks on guys, we want to be concerned about their floor. And Todd Gurley has, a scary floor because at some point that knee could potentially just give out on him. Dirk Cutter and their OC expressed concern about the health of Todd Gurley. I've read some practice reports that indicate that they are limiting him, which is smart on their behalf. But I think that this is a good reminder that Brian Hill is not a terrible pick at the end of drafts. And again, about the red light floor that Todd Gurley presents. Although he did enter a good situation in Atlanta, there's a lot of downside risk there.
What about ceiling risk? Like, I think that even in the best case scenario, Todd Gurley might only play 60% of the snaps, right? Like, let's say he's perfectly fine, the knee is fine. I don't see him. I mean, that's not what the Falcons have done. Anyways, they've been using, even when Devontae Freeman was healthy, they were using Judge Ito Smith and Brian Hill, guys like that. So I kind of think in the best case, that Gurley only gets 65% of the snaps. Now, I understand the 3rd round, 60 to 65% of snaps for a running back in a really good offense is valuable, but I think there's also ceiling concerns as well. For me, round 3, especially round 4, round 5, I'm taking wide receivers and running backs typically. So that's just another reason from a construction standpoint for me to be out on Todd Gurley. But yeah, it certainly doesn't feel good to read this quote, and I think it did sink the ADP of Todd Gurley at least a little bit for now. Maybe it bounces back some as more casuals get in as we get closer to September. That is one of our favorite late round flyer picks. I've been taking Jalen Hurd a lot, around 18. You've had to pay a little bit more for him lately as buzz has kind of crept up, maybe around 15 or so. But the fear, and we're recording this Monday, 2 p.m., the fear right now, and it sounds like testing for ACL network that's happening usually becomes true. So let's operate under the assumption that Jalen Hurd, unfortunately, will miss the year with a major knee injury. We also know Deebo Samuel is out. Well, not out. They think he's going to miss at least week 1 and maybe some more games with his foot issue. I mean, they're down to like Brandon Ayuk, the rookie, Kendrick Bourne, and then like something like Trent Taylor, James. Any ideas on what you think San Francisco will do now that they're missing Deebo and Jalen for the first part of the season?
I think it's just reinforcing that you want to be strong on George Kittle, you want to be strong on Brandon Ayuk. And Brandon Ayuk is apparently tearing up practices, praised by Kyle. One thing to note about Brandon Ayuk is that he comes from an Arizona State program that is run by Herman Edwards. Antonio Pierce is like on their coaching staff. Kevin Mawe is on their coaching staff. They've got a bunch of former NFL players on their coaching staff at Arizona. And Kyle Shanahan said that Brandon Ayuk just came in immensely prepared. He's been crushing on the practice field. We've been way higher on him than ADP for weeks and weeks. And I'm probably going to have to move him up because now I know that his ADP is going to start creeping up and trying to catch us. But I'm going to look at the ranks. This just happened a couple hours ago. The Jalen Hurd, the news that Jalen Hurd's injury was severe. But I'm going to have to look at that right after we get done with this podcast. Again, reinforcing the thing that Jimmy Garoppolo and George Kittle is my singular favorite stat of the entire 2020 fantasy football season. If you look down the depth chart, Kendrick Bourne, despite severe athletic limitations, you're getting 4.68 coming out of college. He's really built to be a role player, and that's how he's been used. But he may have to become a little bit more than that, at least until Deebo Samuel comes back. And he's going to be a guy that I look at maybe putting toward the end of the top 150. We can, start to talk a little bit about Dante Pettis and Jordan Reed, Trent Taylor, just guys to keep in mind. He's still top of the San Francisco, and that's going to be George Kittle, that's going to be Brandon Ayuk, and to a lesser extent, Kendrick Bourne.
Yeah, it seems like somebody like Kyle Shanahan, who doesn't just have a system that he runs for everybody, he's going to adjust the scheme to his talent. I can see a lot of 2 wide receiver sets, at least until Deebo Samuel gets back, and maybe that's Kittle and Jordan Reed, maybe that's Kittle and Ross Dwellier, or whatever it is. And I can see a lot of run plays too. And we're going to get into
and they're going to play a lot of Juszczyk, who, remember, guess, like 6
Tough
weeks.
shot here. Tough to get on the
And he
5,
should
and
definitely
tough
be
to get on the
involved
7.
as well. So yeah, I think that going beyond the Ayuk Bourne stuff is definitely a case of FPS. But Kendrick Bourne's definitely got a red zone role as always. Speaking of the 49ers, Matt Mattson, one of our favorite beat writers for the 49ers, covers the 49ers, has covered the 49ers for as long as I've been doing this. And God, Matt, he's been just doing this for so long at such a high level. He sent out a tweet that he thinks Tevin Coleman and Raheem Mostert will share early downtime, and Jerick McKinnon, old friend Jerick McKinnon, will play on pass downs. It's been so long since Jerick McKinnon played. I feel like people have written him off and forgot about him, and maybe he's not healthy, but all the reports are on my concern with taking Raheem Mostert in the 4th, 5th, and even the 6th, I'm a little shaky. Maybe I shouldn't be, but definitely the 4th and the 5th. Man, if he's going to share that early downward and lose the pass downward, where are we getting this huge floor ceiling combo from Raheem Mostert from? So I think that Matt Mattsion's take is probably right. The gap between Tevin Coleman and Raheem Mostert ADP is far too egregious right now. Raheem Mostert 56.9 ADP, Tevin Coleman 84.9, Jerick McKinnon 175.6, and I haven't mentioned Jeff Wilson yet. So with all that said, and now we have, in light of the Jalen Hurd injury, in light of the Deebo Samuel injury, any new takes on the San Francisco?
Yeah, see, I was unwilling to take Jerick McKinnon particularly seriously until he got out of the practice field and showed he could string together practices. Just because, he's been physically debilitated for 2 years. We have not seen him play football. I guess the last time he played any sort of competitive version of football was 2018 training camp, when apparently he was tearing it up. Matt Barrows, another long time, I think he's been doing it almost as long as Matt Mayako. Matt Barrows has been covering the 49ers for a really long time. In one of his recent pieces, he was talking about how Jerick McKinnon didn't look any different than he did during 2018 training camp. McKinnon, of course, later tore his ACL during that training camp, and he just couldn't get his knee right in 2019 training camp and wound up missing the entire season. Now he's back and healthy. He's still, he's younger than Raheem Mostert. He is definitely better in the passing game than both Tevin Coleman and Raheem Mostert. And so, if he is able to stay healthy, I think that that's probably the role that we should expect him to play. I think that that's what Matt Barrows and Matt Mayako both believe to be the case, and that they're going to use a hot hand rotation on the early downs and McKinnon in the passing game. And so now that we have seen that McKinnon is at least able to do physical things day after day, I think I'm gonna put him into a place where he's now someone that we're very, very willing to draft, if not wanting to draft, because he's going to be really, really cheap. He's going to be 13th, 14th, 15th round, RB5, RB6 type guy. But I'm willing to take a chance on him now that I know he can at least string together a few days of practice, because that was a complete unknown considering his history over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I know we spent a lot of time on the 49ers, and one reason that I think that it's important is, as Evans mentioned many times, 49ers' first month schedule is just outrageous. We're going to be talking about them a ton in DFS because their matchups are going to be so good. So I do think it's worth thinking pretty deeply about the 49ers as we get closer to the season. Let's move to the Colts. You mentioned hot hand, and so we got some coach speak, and people ran with it, and I certainly was not going to run with this coach speak where they say Marlon Mack's the starter, and that's what you're going to say. I mean, Jonathan Taylor is a rookie. You're not going to insult Marlon Mack by saying, "Oh no, Marlon Mack's going to come off the bench." I did notice that the coaches he said, "Well, Marlon Mack's a starter, but it's going to be a hot hand situation." The guy's so more likely, to me at least, to get the hot hand is Jonathan Taylor, who's just, I don't think people realize, from a size, speed, production standpoint, how good of a prospect Jonathan Taylor was. 233 pounds, 4.39, ran for 6,100 yards in 3 years at Wisconsin, caught 26 balls as a junior. Jonathan Taylor, if this was 10 years ago, would have been a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, for sure. So I know the ADP gap is massive. I don't know if Marlon Mack's going to be able to hold off Jonathan Taylor. I guess my main point of bringing this up is I didn't want people to buy into the coach speak about Marlon Mack being the quote-unquote starter. But what do you think about what's going on with Indy as we're up to date now in the middle of August?
So I think that the Colts are just set up to have a ton of team rushing attempts. Because first of all, they have the softest schedule according to opposing win totals during the 2020 season, and that hits at future positive game script. practice. They're returning all 5 starters on the offensive line from maybe the best offensive line in the league. They didn't need to go trade up for Jonathan Taylor in the draft. They had Marlon Mack. They're bringing back Naheem Hines. Jordan Wilkins, I think, is a serviceable. He would have been a serviceable number 3 back. They did not have to go do that, but they did. I think they want to run the ball. We saw that from them last year. I think that they don't want to put Phillip Rivers into situations where he's having to throw the ball 40 times a game. Their defense, I think, is going to be better. This year, they're a team that is maintaining incredible continuity from the offensive line to the head coach, to the offensive coordinator, to the defensive coordinator. Obviously, they're changing out the quarterback, but the quarterback knows Nick Sirianni, the OC, and Frank Reich from San Diego. Yeah. They were all together.
Really had to talk myself into playing that soft draw shot.
This is going to be a very
I really had to hit that good to make sure I didn't get hooked behind the ball.
Which I agree with you is inevitable.
And I could have tried to draw much harder and go one reel and back.
And I'm willing to take Marlon Mack time and time again.
It really wasn't laying good. I knew it was the right shot, but it's a shot that's really easy to undercut and miss it that way. I'm glad I hit that good and was able to get out.
At Wisconsin, he caught very, very few passes. There is some downside there to Jonathan Taylor, enough for me to like Marlon Mack in the 9th, 10th, 11th round, which is usually where he goes. Nobody's excited to take Marlon Mack this year, and I get it, but I'll take him definitely as my RB4, my RB5.
Yeah, kind of similar to the Kerryon Johnson situation, which we can talk about in the pod. But I would say, and we were talking to Leone about this a little bit, about thinking in the context of who's going to be a first-round pick in the 2021 fantasy draft or the 2022 fantasy draft, and you can start to shape your takes that way.
Rating much better today in general.
Isn't a first or second round pick next year. I'd be shocked with Marlon Mack.
Not like completely dialed in, but some breaks like that one I'm hitting really good.
Profile. That's why if you go to Pat Crane's Dynasty rankings, you'll see how high Jonathan Taylor is.
And I think I mentioned this before. The situation for Jonathan Taylor reminds me a lot of Josh Jacobs last year, to where we really can't have a high reception or target expectation for Jonathan Taylor, but he could jump on the scene and become one of the best rushers in the league. And his situation, his environment is a lot better than what Josh Jacobs was jumping into last year. He's going to come in here, and I think he's got even better breakaway, like long run potential. That had a lot at Wisconsin. So sort of like a rich man's version of Josh Jacobs. Entering last year, I think when Josh Jacobs would be a 3rd or 4th round pick, now he's a consensus 2nd round pick. I can see, that a very similar situation.
Way too
far. I did an article in the draft kit last year where I tried to project guys who were going 3rd round or later who would be in the 1st round this year, and I had some hits at Derrick Henry there, Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs. I had Godwin, I had Eckler on there. I also had O.J. Howard, I had Kerryon Johnson, at Christian Kirk's side. But anyways, I'm working on that article for this year now, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, rankings change. You have moved Randall Cobb into the top 150 at wide receiver 58, 135th overall, just ahead of Anthony Miller. And obviously, you guys go back and listen to my conversation with Matt Harmon about Anthony Miller, who he's very high on. Anthony Miller, Randall Cobb is kind of, nobody's going to be excited about Randall Cobb. Had 55 catches last year for Dallas as their number 3 wide receiver entering his age 30 season. It seems like he's been around forever, and I can't believe he's only 30. Like, he's been in the league for 10 years. I can't believe he's only 30. But anyways, pretty good situation here. And if you think Will Fuller is not a load-bearing wideout, i.e. Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks aren't getting 8, 9, 10 targets a game, maybe there is enough for Randall Cobb in there to sneak in. So what made you put Randall Cobb into the top 150 now?
Yeah, just sort of reevaluating the Texans' situation. I think that they're going to be, first of all, they have one of the toughest schedules in the league. They're going to be throwing the ball often. I think their defense is just going to be absolutely miserable. And, I like taking shots on their receiver core. And although we are very high on Will Fuller, and we're going to stay that way, we also do have to understand that there is a major injury risk to Will Fuller. So if Will Fuller goes down, as he has been known to do, then targets are going to be distributed among a wide receiver core that becomes Kenny Stills, Randall Cobb, and Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks also has a concerning injury history. Kenny Stills already missed a big chunk of training camp on NFI. They do not have target commanders at tight end, and Deshaun Watson is not a check down quarterback. Like he doesn't check down to running backs frequently. So I think that Randall Cobb just has a very secure role.
Oh.
You know, he's not the sexiest player. I think he's a very, very fine best ball pick. I think that he does make sense in stacks with Deshaun Watson. And I think that secure role in a high volume passing attack, and Bill O'Brien consistently over the years has finished like top 12 in offensive pace. And Deshaun Watson plays at his best. I think just from eyeballing him and looking at his statistics in certain situations, Deshaun Watson plays at his best when he is playing with urgency. So that secure role for Randall Cobb, I mean, I think that he's got a pretty good floor, and I think he's going to mix in some spike weeks. He's a guy that I want our audience to be taking late in best ball drafts, and I think he makes some redraft pick as well in sort of deeper leagues as a wide receiver 5, 6, 7.
He's certainly extremely, extremely cheap. I can be honest and say I haven't taken any Randall Cobb yet this offseason, but I'm going to at least think about it now. Okay. Report out of New England, and we've talked about this a couple times before, but now from Jeff Howe, no sure thing Sony Michel ready for week 1. Biggest ranking 50, James White 100th overall, Damian Harris 102nd overall. Sony Michel has been dropped completely out of the top 150, obviously Rex Burkhead. Lamar Miller not in the top 150 at all. First of all, you talk about that, and then I want to talk about James White, because I know we've had some internal debate about where we should have James White ranked. So talk to the people first about Sony Michel getting completely removed, and James White 100th, Damian Harris 102nd.
I mean, the writing on the wall for Sony Michel was really, really bad for a long time at this point. You talked to Dr. Chow about him. I don't want to put words in Dr. Chow's mouth, but I mean, he's not optimistic for the future career of Sony Michel. Just based on the knee injuries, and now you have the foot injury, and the beat writers don't even know if he's going to be ready for week 1. We know he contributes nothing in the passing game. He was terrible last year, and there's no reason for us to be drafting Sony Michel pretty much at all at this point. We've been way lower than consensus on him throughout. Like, none of our audience should have any shares of Sony Michel at this point, but we're going to make sure that continues, and we're going to be willing to take throw late round darts at Damian Harris, maybe a little Rex Burkhead is like the last pick in your draft. But James White, and North Turner has talked about this. Cam Newton really had an excellent 10-game run at the beginning of 2018 when the Panthers were emphasizing getting the ball out of his hands quickly, throwing passes to running backs on early downs, which is really, really efficient way to play, because defenses are in like base sets with their nose tackle and their strong side linebacker on the field, and not they're not 60 backs, not 3 safeties, like they're in their heavy packages. When you throw passes in those situations, you have a competitive advantage on the defense. The Panthers realized that, and Cam completed 68, 69% of his passes that year. McCaffrey broke out from a receiving standpoint. James White, I think, is going to be on the field a ton at this point, based on Sony Michel and the lack of established production from Damian Harris, and just how this running back is pictured in the open training camp right after they signed. I mean, he's coming off a torn ACL. The open training camp on what I think was NFI or EUP, and he's not ready to go. So I think the guys that we're looking at from this backfield are clearly James White and Damian Harris, and unfortunately, consensus is still way higher than us on James White. He's like RB32 in FFPC drafts over the last 4 days, and we have him at RB38. But I think he's going to be on the field a ton, and then I think that Damian Harris right now is set up to be their main early down back. No guarantees on that, but he's a guy that I'm willing to take late.
Yeah, I think, from talking to Leone, and the point on James White is that these pass catching backs are so valuable. Their best ball win rates are really good because a target is worth so much more than a rush. People say, well, he's only going to get 4 or 5 carries. 1 or 2 carries, 6, 7 targets. It's just incredibly valuable. And in 7 weeks, even if you field a ton, there's a lot of value in James White. My concern, and maybe it's a bad take because Christian McCaffrey did catch 107 balls with Cam in 2018. likeliest rate of throwing to running backs. So I think it's a hard thing to quantify. Tom Brady throwing to James White out of the backfield is just a ton of chemistry. I know Evans talked a ton about that. I'm not sure Cam will have the same chemistry with James White, but we'll see. I do like the Damian Harris part of it. All right. Let's get to the big dog, man. We are warming on the big dog. And I can't believe I'm saying it's not good for the brand, but I'm actually warming on the big dog as well. You have moved the big dog up into tier 1. Big dog is now with the other guys, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook. Now, Derrick Henry is in that tier. What made you move Derrick Henry into this top tier of running backs? And along with that, given the way drafts are setting up, is Derrick Henry now the best pick if you look at the number 6 overall pick?
Yeah, he's the number 6 overall pick, I think, right now. And Dwayne McFarland, who's an excellent analyst, is going to be doing a bunch of stuff for us this year, did last year. Also works for PFF. He thinks that there's a legitimate debate for Derrick Henry to be number 4 overall now, and he's the usage guy. That's what Dwayne McFarland does. He writes the utilization reports, and he is on top of this in terms of Derrick Henry actually becoming a true everyday.
Caught it in this side of the pocket, forced it over an extra 3-4 inches there.
And they essentially tried to replace him with Darrington Evans, which in a normal year, I suppose, could have worked out. But Darrington Evans is a late 3rd round pick out of Appalachian State with very, very little practice time with his new NFL team. And that's taking a big leap of competition that is, being, behind the 8 ball in terms of preparation heading into the season. And then he started to fumble on the practice field. He had two fumbles in practice the other day. And some people pointed out that, hey, Darrington Evans, he had 0 fumbles at Appalachian State. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore. What he needs to do in order to get on the field and earn opportunity in the NFL is to show that he can be trusted. And fumbling twice in practice is no way to show that you can be trusted by your NFL team. And I think the winds have been blowing in this direction anyways. Regardless of how many times Darrington Evans fumbles on the practice field. I think the receiving outlook has been pointing upward for Derrick Henry entering this season. We know he's going to we know the carries are going to be there. I think that we can sort of bank on him being efficient, maybe not as efficient as last year, but being efficient. It's a great offensive line. It's another team with a ton of continuity. It's really, really, really well run, well orchestrated offense. And if we can just get him catches, a few more screen passes. I'm begging Arthur Smith this year just have 2 screen passes to Derrick Henry in the playbook for every single game. That's really, really going to help. He has not ever cleared 18 receptions in a season. And I think he can get to 30-35 this year.
Pretty much a dead scratch, very close.
Yeah, if I was Arthur Smith, I would do the play action into the screen, right? Like you play action Derrick Henry, and then you go off the screen. It's just everybody's going to swarm to Derrick Henry on the ground. Derrick Henry's never caught more than 18 balls in a season, never been targeted more than 24 times. And this kind of goes back to college. No coaches identified him as a pass catcher. But like you said, they let Dion Lewis go. Dion Lewis saw 32 targets last season, which doesn't sound like a lot, but on the Titans, who throw so infrequently, it kind of was a lot. And behind Darrington Evans, I don't even know these guys, like Dalen Dawkins, Singers Perry. Like, it seems unlikely that you would put those guys on the field ahead of Henry. And for me, why I'm warming to Derrick Henry even more than the receiving stuff is rushing efficiency against schedule. I mean, our friends at Sharp Football identified the Titans as projected to have the softest schedule in terms of rushing efficiency defenses that they'll face. Evan mentioned continuity. They did lose Jack Conklin. Brandon had only had them 13th in his offensive line rankings, but I think returning 4 starters does matter on that offensive line for the Titans.
They're returning 4 starters, then they replaced Jack Conklin with their 1st round pick.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're serious about keeping this running game intact.
And so, if you're comparing, if you're on the clock at 6 overall, and you're comparing Derrick Henry to Michael Thomas to Devontae Adams and picks like that, it's like, well, yeah, I would probably like Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams a little bit more, but from a roster construction standpoint, getting a running back in the 1st round is going to set you up to attack wide receiver.
Oh, I hit that
which is where I personally
9 ball,
so,
just
yeah, I'm warming on Derrick memory
excellent.
for those
Not to
reasons.
hit
We'll talk
that
about
9
the
ball
downside
any
DFS
better.
when we get there, when you play Derrick Henry and all of a
It's a
sudden
really tough
Tyson
shot to
behind
jack
you're in
up
big
and have
trouble,
to
and
hit
that's
it,
going to be a problem. But I think from a season-long perspective,
and hit it at the speed
on Derrick Henry, we'll see where
that
he
I
comes
did.
in salaries. By the way,
If you hit it
salaries
really
on DraftKings,
hard, you can
fans
work
are both
the
out. Very
cue
exciting.
ball,
Talk more about that soon.
but
All right. Speaking of
you know, I
arguments,
didn't want to hit it
it's
really hard. I
this DJ Moore
needed to
situation,
maintain
man. I didn't want to
position,
get involved in this because I really don't have a strong take.
so
On
I
DJ
hit that
Moore,
one
you
really good.
after like pressure, outside pressure, well, not outside pressure, internal pressure, you moved DJ Moore up from wide receiver 15 to your wide receiver 10. Passes Mike Evans, Odell, Galladay, Calvin Ridley, all still in the same tier. And I know you're going to say they're all extremely close together. DJ Moore certainly sent the age 23 season, caught 87 balls, passing for some goals for quarterback. But I would note that Matt Rule did recruit DJ Moore here to Temple pretty hard. So yeah, it's a new coaching staff. DJ Moore ended up going to Maryland, but Matt Rule has liked DJ Moore going back to high school. So for what it's worth. Anyways, telling people what happened here. They want to know why'd you move DJ Moore up from wide receiver 15 to wide receiver 10.
I feel like KB's interjected himself into the rankings. I don't know. Does T want to just do the rankings? Taylor, do you just? I caved to Taylor KB pressure and moved up. I don't really care though because they're all like in the same tier. Like it's Mike Evans, it's Odell Beckham, it's DJ Moore, it's who else is in there? Like Galladay,
Calvin Ridley.
Calvin Ridley's in there, Juju. I mean these guys are all awesome picks. DeAndre Hopkins is even in there. These guys are all great picks, and they're literally all just stacked right next to each other because their projections are similar. Their floor ceiling expectations are similar, and so to move DJ Moore from wide receiver 15 to wide receiver 10, it doesn't even really move the needle. But at that time, we were, I think, 4 spots below consensus in terms of wide receiver rankings on DJ Moore. Than FFPC ADP, and I put out a tweet that said we were demonstrably lower on DJ Moore. That's just that was a fact. But when you look at it from a tier standpoint, when you look at it from a top 50 standpoint, it doesn't make a big difference. So I did cave to the pressure of Taylor KB, and again, every time I argue with Taylor KB, he turns out right anyways. So I just try to avoid those arguments, cave here, and I gave into him like a schmuck.
Yeah, a lot of you guys probably don't know who Taylor is. You can go back and listen to we did, and I did a podcast just me and Taylor where we talked about some stuff about a month or two ago. You can go back and listen to that. Let's talk about DJ Moore's situation just in a vacuum for a second, not relative to these other guys, because he is breaking in a new quarterback. He's breaking in a new offensive scheme. We don't know exactly how they're going to use Curtis Samuel. So I think there's some unknowns with DJ Moore, maybe more unknowns than there is with, say, Calvin Ridley, than with Odell Beckham, who is healthier and hopefully has a new scheme also, but hopefully has a better scheme. So I think that you can poke some holes in DJ Moore relative to these other guys. The best thing that DJ Moore has going for him is I think his skill set fits really well with what Teddy Bridgewater does well. And DJ Moore is ascending. He's freaking 23 years old. So there's a fact about DJ Moore.
No, I love him. He's that big, like, it's really like the second tier of wide receivers. I mean, I pretty much love everyone in that tier. Adam Thielen is also in that tier, all those guys we just talked about. Yeah, but I mean, I had him, I guess, relatively low within that tier because of the things that you mentioned, because they're changing everything. They're changing the coaching staff, they're changing the quarterback. I do agree with you. And they also added Robbie Anderson. McCaffrey obviously is going to have a massive target share. I think Ian Thomas can take definitely take a step forward. I expect Curtis Samuel to. So, DJ Moore's target competition within his own offense is genuine. I mean, there is legit in-house target competition. We don't know who exactly is going to mesh immediately with Teddy Bridgewater. I like the way that DJ Moore plays in relation to the way that Teddy Bridgewater plays, which is at a low ADOT. DJ Moore, one of the best, has consistently been one of the best run after catch receivers in the NFL since he entered it. He's really, really young. There's some stat in I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's in our tiers, and it shows that he's top 10 receiving yards to the age of 23, or something like that over the last decade. I mean, he's really been off to a great start in his career. But the reason I did have him previously lower in that tier is because of those uncertainties. But but I love him enough that, again, it's no skin off my back to just move him up a little bit if that's what the people want.
Okay. Speaking of moving up a little bit, and moving the guy up one spot, we're not particularly going to talk about, but I do think people have an interesting debate when they're on the clock. Round 4, Terry Mclaurin versus AJ Brown. We decided to move Terry Mclaurin one spot ahead of AJ Brown. I think the biggest knock on AJ Brown, if there is one, is just unsustainable efficiency. 20 yards per catch last year, 8 touchdowns on just 52 catches. And the way the Titans want to play, we saw in the playoffs. AJ Brown had 10 targets in 3 games, in 3 playoff games. And I know they got some tough spots and everything, but God, how many wide receivers that go in the 3rd round can line up for 3 playoff games and get to I'm not trying to knock AJ Brown. I certainly prefer Terry McLaurin from a pure volume perspective. But you decided to make the move McLaurin over AJ Brown by one spot. What were you thinking there?
It's just based almost entirely on my self-drafting. And, I'm not going to put ranked guys ahead of other guys when I'm, drafting other guys ahead of the top guy. I'm going to take McLaurin ahead of AJ Brown. And I think that there could be a 40 target discrepancy between the two. I absolutely love AJ Brown. He reminds me of he had 84 targets last year, and look at what he did. He didn't play 70% of snaps until week 10 last year, and look at what he did. It's one of those situations where, look, maybe he won't be as efficient, but he's going to be able to cover for a lot of that. Maybe even, compensate for that based on the fact that he's going to be playing more. He's going to go from 84 targets to like 110. And if he gets 120, then he might outscore McLaurin with 150. I'm going to be drafting Terry McLaurin ahead of AJ Brown. I've already seen myself do that. Have that decision. Take Terry McLaurin. And so then, correspondingly, we go into the rankings, we go into the log, we make the change, and that's what happened in this situation.
Yeah. By the way, for you guys who are following along, corresponding to Evans' top 150, he's also keeping a change log every time he makes a change. The top 150 was the date, explains the change that he made. Okay. Jets situation, tough schedule for the Jets, Adam Gase and all that, but I do like Chris Herndon, man. He's getting a lot of buzz, and also I would note that Denzel Mims is already hurt, which isn't a good sign for him. Vincent Smith, who was kind of filling in for Denzel Mims on the outside, he's already banged up. So yeah, they have Jamison Crowder, who's everything's going to get a ton of targets. They have Rashad Perriman, who I think we both think is underrated. Man, that's just tight ends. And I talked about this with Noah Fan maybe a few weeks ago. There's not that many tight ends that as a rookie are able to perform from a receiving perspective and go over 500 yards. Chris Herndon did that as a rookie, just had an absolute disaster of a season last year with suspension and then injury. But yeah, I like Chris Herndon, man, and I keep talking about that late tier of tight ends. And I would put Chris Herndon in the mix. I wish he wasn't attached to Adam Gase. I wish he that the Jets have. I do like Chris Herndon just in general from a volume and from a talent perspective. So Jets situation and pass catching right now, can we stomach any of these guys?
Yeah, we can. I understand that Jamison Crowder feels like a 3 condom pick, but anyone that has a chance at like 140, 150 targets, and is going in like the freaking 8th and 9th round, we need to be hammering that actually. Last year he had 122. The situation has really spread out. Both the perimeter receivers are changing. Denzel Mims has been dealing with his hamstring injury. You mentioned that the schedule is tough. That could actually work in favor of the passing game if they're playing from behind. They lost their 2 best defensive players in Jamal Adams. They traded CJ Mosley, opted out. I'm all about drafting Jamison Crowder in like the 8th and 9th round. I think that you smash the button on him. And I'm going to move Chris Herndon up. I like the fact that Adam Gase came out and said he's our starting tight end because they did play Ryan Griffin like almost 100% of the snaps last year and gave him a contract extension after the season. So that would suggest to me, using like trying to be pragmatic that they want to continue to play Ryan Griffin to some extent. But Herndon has just apparently looked so good on the backfield. They're like, screw it, we're rolling with Herndon. There's a lot of target upside there. I like taking Perryman too late. All these guys. This is what's nice about these guys. is that their ADPs are all very, very late. Even Darnold, he's like the last job secure quarterback to get drafted. I mean, people are taking Drew Lock ahead of him, which I think is ridiculous. But yeah, their offensive line also, they're returning 0 starters, but their talent got a lot better up front. So there are, and also from weeks 6 through 17 last year, they did start to play faster. They finished 11th in offensive plays from weeks 6 through 17 last year. That's something that Adam Gase has talked about for a long time, wanting to do.
Last track.
Very rarely actually.
And I could possibly end on the best set on the last game of 12 weeks.
So,
12 weeks, minimum 3 games each week, and I think if I run out here, this will be my best set in the whole thing. 255 is my highest, so.
Yeah. Okay. Last thing we're going to talk about today is the Rams wide receivers. And we had some questions on the Rams wide receivers. No news here, no rankings change. I just wanted to bring it up because we haven't really spent much time talking about Rams wide receivers. You have Cooper Kupp 36th overall, Robert Woods, aka Bob Trees, 39th overall. I mean, Cooper Kupp last year coming out the ACL just went absolutely nuclear to start last year. I think it was like 5 100 games in his first year.
Come on, Balls, get in there.
Catches and ton touchdowns. They go out there and replace Brandon Cooks in-house with Josh Reynolds and maybe Van Jefferson.
It's doable.
Yeah, I mean,
6 to the 7, 7 to the 8. I mean, they're tight, good position play, but it's doable.
Before, when I couldn't choose who I like more between Kupp and Woods and Cooks, I would just be like, I can't decide. I'm taking none, and then I would just get trucked by like these huge Cooper Kupp games, And so I don't want that to happen to people in season long. So how are you thinking about the Rams wide receivers?
Yeah, we have Kupp and Woods very close together. I believe Kupp is wide receiver 18 and Woods is wide receiver 22. I think that Cooper Kupp has shown a higher ceiling than Robert Woods, and that's a main contributing factor.
I always play the combo if I have to.
Kupp ahead of Woods. I think Woods is a rock-solid wide receiver 2 pick. I think that some of the ways that he gets hailed in the fantasy community is a little bit overboard. I think he's a fine wide receiver 2 pick. I think that in his tier of receivers, there are a lot of receivers around him, like DJ Chark and T.Y. Hilton, guys that have legit wide receiver 1 upside. I'm not sure that Robert Woods has that. I think Cooper Kupp has obviously shown that he can produce at a wide receiver 1 level. And that's sort of my take on the situation. If you want to go deeper down, I think Josh Reynolds is an excellent, wide receiver pick in like the wide receiver 55 or 65 range. He goes really, really late in drafts. And I think that Van Jefferson is going to be a year for him. But yeah, Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. Cooper Kupp, like both high floor wide receiver 2s, but Kupp has the higher ceiling, and therefore that's why we have him ranked ahead of Woods.
I will say, Kupp and Woods, I think, are going probably at cost. But if you think the Rams are going to bounce back and Sean McVay is going to find it again, I mean, you can make a case that the rest of the guys, Cam Akers, Gerald Everett, Jared Goff, Josh Reynolds, are all going, way later than they should, assuming that if you think the Rams are going to have a big year. And so I think there's some best ball stacks to be had if you end up with Woods in round 3, round 4, creating Rams best ball stacks. I think is somewhat interesting at least to think about. Okay. We're back later this week with Mike Leone to talk about some position strategy guides. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, hit subscribe, leave us a review. It's all free. So, for producer Luke, for Evan, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.
All right. Okay, a couple ways I can go here. Go here. Chance of getting hooked, going too far. I think I gotta run into the 9 or come just on this side of it. I think that's the play. To hit this a little harder than I want. Should be able to get up to about here. Pretty much just straight stun. Maybe a touch forward. Could come a little more. Okay. Might be able to hold it with the soft draw. Oh, it's really a finesse shot. That's a shot. Yes. All right. Okay, that was huge. So that set, I ran the first 3. Got a spare in rack 4, ran 5, spare in rack 6, and then ran 6 and out. So I ran 10 out of 12 racks with no open frames. I did that once before, but just the way that like the order in which I ran the racks, I have a feeling there's going to be more points. There's probably 260 plus. Like I said, my highest before was 255. This is my last game of the season, before the tournaments. So I really, really wanted to try to get a perfect game some point this season. You know, I did have the 255 where I got, same thing, ran 10 out of 12, and the other two were spares. And then I just did it again. So, didn't get 12 in a row, but, got fairly close. Perfect game for me is probably a little tough. I'm not as good as a Mattson, even though I can beat his score sometimes. So, all in all, punch the scores in, but I'll take it. Played really solid. Was really clutch down the stretch there. Really wanted that bad. And Ryan Klinger, if you end up watching this, thanks for a great season. It's been fun. Thanks for all the hard work you do with this too.